Right, good evening. It's a Saturday evening and this is my first time out in over 6 months. What with having a broken rib, torn calf muscle and Achilles problems, oh, and ocular shingles, I haven't had a great time of it. But now I am finally back out again in March before the clocks change. So I thought I would come out on a Saturday evening. Set out far too late and got here after dark, so had to set up with the head torch, but that's all part of the fun, isn't it? So main reason I wanted to come out is I've got some new equipment. I've for a long time really liked my Thermarest X-Therm sleep mat, but whenever I go out with anybody else they always say how noisy it is. So I've bought myself the Alpkit Radiant. It's much cheaper than the XTherm, and allegedly it is actually warmer, it has a higher R value. So I've brought that out tonight along with the Alpkit Drift pillow just to give it a test out. It's not going to be a particularly cold night, but I'll still give it a good go and we'll see what it's like. Mainly we'll see if it's a little bit quieter than the XTherm and if it's a little bit more comfortable. I never really got on with the XTherm's horizontal baffles, just always seemed to be rolling around on it. So the Alpkit one is more like a quilted version with little dimples in it. So here's my setup. I'm in the Strat 1, Tarp Tent Stratospire 1. Got my Enlightened equipment quilt, and there is the Alpkit Radiant. You can see in here the quilted sections of it, unlike the normal baffles. It's still a little bit crinkly. And the top is quite crackly as well. I believe it's made from recycled material, so that may be partly why it's so crinkly. It's probably come out of the sea. And up the end there, I've got the Drift pillow. It's one of those things when you buy on the internet, they always tend up being half the size that you thought they were going to be. So my initial thoughts on the Alpkit Radiant are the valve on it is awful. I really like the Thermarest X-Therm's wing valve. You can unscrew it, you can then turn the wings, you can let a little bit of air out, a little bit of air into it. This is just like the valves you get on a Lilo. Much cheaper. Also comes with an inflation sack that works quite well. You've got the nubbin on the end that goes into the valve. It takes 5 or 6 good bagfuls in order to pump it up. Haven't used my air pump on it at the moment. I've only used it using the pump sack. Other things to say about it. Size wise, it's virtually the same size as the XTherm Max that I've got. So it's 26 inches wide and it's well over 6'6" long. Plenty big enough and virtually fills up the Strat 1. So for my wild camp tonight, I've come out to one of my known locations. I've come out to the Wye Downs in Kent. Nice view out over the local countryside and a relatively secluded spot. The weather's not forecast to be bad at all tonight. In fact, the forecast is it will only get down to 8 to 10 degrees. Wind may pick up around midnight and it could be gusting up to about 30 miles an hour. But the good old Strat 1, that'll be fine in that sort of wind. It's well pegged down, lovely robust tent, if a little bit small, but enormous vestibules. So this is my location tonight, and beyond the tent there, over the Wye Downs, you can see the lights of Ashford in the distance. So although I've missed my sunset, thought I should still toast the sun with a lively brewdog, Elvis juice. So, cheers, happy Saturday to you. The wind definitely is picking up at the moment, not too bad though. So, as well as having the new camping equipment this time, I've also got some new photography equipment. I'm using the Rode Wireless Pro mic setup rather than the Synco ones that I had all that problem with last year when I went up to Dartmoor. And also, rather than using the GoPro and the Insta360, trying videoing on a mirrorless camera. Trouble is with the mirrorless cameras, they're not quite as simple as the GoPro and Insta360. You've got to worry about exposure, ISO and focusing. Not sure how well it'll work, but I thought this is a nice short little trip, local to home, only about 45 minutes away. So come up here and just give it a go. Try out the equipment, try out the mat, and hopefully it'll work. If not, haven't lost very much. So, good morning to you. It's a lovely morning up here. Sun's up. It is now 8:15 in the morning. Had a decent night's sleep, not the best. The wind did come up very strongly overnight, so it was forecast for about 29 to 30 mile an hour, and I firmly believe it. Strap one though, coped with it, took it all in its stride, and apart from keeping me awake until about 1 o'clock, it wasn't too bad at all. And this morning it's really still, really dewy and really still. Sun's coming up in the east over there. Unfortunately, it's not falling on the tent yet, so the tent is a little bit damp. So I've had to give it a wipe over. But because it's sil poly rather than sil nylon, it didn't get so waterlogged as sil nylon often does. So after spending my first night on the Alpkit Radiant, here it is. It is, you can see, about the size of, I guess, a 2 litre pop bottle, maybe a little bit smaller. Comes with a sack that you can put it into, which I found is very, very difficult to get it back into. So I just use an elastic band around it. But it's just a smidgen too small to get it back in there easily. But it does pack up quite small. The pump sack, this is a pump sack, really big pump sack, and it's got a plug on the bottom of it, so you can plug it up and actually use it as a dry bag, which is really useful, dual purpose. Last night I was talking about the valve on the bottom of the sleeping pad, and the valve is the same as it is on this pump sack. All there is a rubber ring, and inside, don't know whether you can see that, there is a rubber flap that acts as a non-return valve. And then there's the plug that goes into it, which is really quite difficult to get in. This is exactly the same design as is on the pad itself. What I found last night was I'd pumped this up, that was all fine, but I'd overinflated it very slightly. Not sure whether that was because my body warmth in it had warmed it up a little bit, but with the XTherm and their little wing valve, what I would have done in that case is just slackened it off and taken a little bit of the air out. But in this Alpkit Radiant, it is such a faff to do it, I didn't actually take any air out. So I could have been that little bit more comfortable if I could be bothered to inflate it properly. Otherwise, it was very warm. It was quite a nice experience last night. I'm not convinced it is quite as warm as the XTherm, but it definitely is very warm. Much warmer than the uninsulated or the pads with an R value of around 3 or 4. Very good pad. Other comments on it. I said that it's about 3 inches shorter than the XTherm, and I really noticed that. My toes overhang one end of it. I really wish I had those extra 3 inches of length on it. Because it's the quilted design with like the buttons going through rather than the baffles of the XTherm, what I found is it seemed to slope off at the edges more. So whilst it's just as wide as the XTherm, it felt narrower because the edges taper down, whereas the XTherm goes all the way to the edge. The only other minor criticism I have of it is it pumps. As you sit up or you turn over and you put pressure on your hips or your bum, it tends to pump up the shoulder and the foot end much more than the XTherm does. I think the XTherm, with all those baffles and like Hessian inside, I think it slows down the airflow. So as you sit on one bit, the air just gradually moves into the other. This obviously has a much more open structure inside. So as you move about, the air very quickly rushes to the other end of the pad. It's not a problem at all though. And considering that this pad is about 40% of the price of the XTherm, I think it is brilliant value for money. It's got just as good an R value of 7.2. It weighs about 700 grams, including the pump sack, which is very close to the XTherm. And it's 9 centimeters thick versus the 7.5 of the XTherm. So should be a little bit more comfortable, slightly shorter overall, and very slightly lighter with equivalent performance, but at 40% of the price. And who doesn't like that? Okay, this was my spot last night. As normal, leave no trace apart from a little flattened grass. And up there on the ridge is my rucksack. Now, because it was summer and I was spending more than one night out, I've only bought a 30-litre rucksack with me. It's quite amazing. Just under 5.7 kilos all in. And there it is. It's an Osprey 30-litre backpack at 5.7 kilos. Plus my camera gear. But 5.7 kilos. Can't grumble about that. Right then, it's time to head off. And I'm going to head off up that way because there is one velo viewer tile around here that I've never managed to get. And apparently there's a footpath from this ridgetop path, goes across to the woods, and I can get that tile. So I'll see you in a bit. Before I leave, I'll give you a quick panorama around. It's a beautiful spot up here on the Wye Downs. So over that way, we've got Dungeness. I think you can just about make out the nuclear power station, the decommissioned nuclear power station that's down there. You then pan around. Somewhere over that way you've got the Channel Tunnel as well. The large conurbation ahead of us there is Ashford. And then carrying on round, we've got in the foreground here the village of Wye. And Maidstone is just beyond that ridge, the North Downs ridge over that way. Okay, that's my tile grabbed. I've walked about 50 yards into it this time to make sure that I don't miss it the way that I did on another time. Now, I'll be heading back to the car. Considering that this area is only about 10-minute drive from the huge town of Ashford, I'm quite amazed how quiet it is up here, how peaceful, and all of the sheep. Really is a lovely spot. I have just seen a dog walker though. She's the first person I've seen since I've been up here. She's very nice. It's Sunday morning now. Sun's well and truly up, beating down, very warm, and coming to the end of another wild camp. Always enjoyable, always worthwhile, and always great for the soul. So I'll sign off now and say farewell, and hopefully it won't be 6 months till the next one. Bye.